I'm sure you've heard about BAIC, that brand that launched at the Manila International Auto Show 2024, which had a slightly questionable vehicle lineup. Why questionable? Well, because their cars such as the BAIC B80 wagon look strangely similar, probably coincidental, to the Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon. But do you know that they also have more original looking vehicles such as this crossover right beside me? This is the 2024 BAIC Beijing X55 Verve. And in today's video, let's see if this car is any good. Now let's explore the exterior first of this Beijing X55 Verve. Starting off with the front, right? And it immediately greets you with Beijing. Now, as much as it sounds funny, I'm not finding it funny because I'm being racist about it sounding Chinese. No, but can you imagine calling your car, let's say, the New York X55 or the Manila X55? I mean, I just hope that they just stuck with a different name instead of plastering on Beijing over there. But yeah, we can't really do anything about that. Now, for the design over here, it has a very nice split grille design. So you have a small black piece by the top and a more complicated piece by the bottom. Just like a lot of cars nowadays, you have a split headlight assembly too. The top houses your DRLs as well as your turn signals, while here by the bottom are your full LED headlights. Now let's move on over towards the side, and it slightly looks generic, I would say, but it isn't too bad because unlike some other crossovers which want to look a little bit more macho, this looks more like a slightly higher wagon in a way that it's a bit longer than it is tall. That's something I appreciate, very different. It also gets pop-out door handles, which will somehow remind you of the Jetour Dashing or maybe even the Range Rover Velar if you squint hard enough. And for your rims, these are proper huge too. You get 19-inch rims wrapped in Hankook tires, and they are also blacked out. Now for the rear, there's also not that much special design cues over here, aside from your tail lamps, which as you can see right here, kind of pulses, and I really like that look. Again, just like the front, you have Beijing plast over there, which I can't really take very seriously. A pretty nice spoiler on the top, and surprisingly, it goes against the grain of the trend nowadays, where they want to throw in as much fake exhaust or maybe even real exhaust down there. For this one, there are no visible exhausts. So from afar, you might think that this is an electric vehicle, but make no mistake, it is not. There is an actual exhaust pipe, but it is hidden right under there. Now, this tailgate, this is powered, and it is surprisingly decently fast in speed, and in here space is also good. Those rear seats are also foldable 60/40, and you even get a space saver spare tire under this false floor. While the engine visually looks pretty generic insofar as the cover goes, what isn't generic is the power figures it makes, because this engine right here, a 1.5-liter turbocharged gasoline engine, makes the best amount of power in its class at 187 horsepower and 305 Newton meters of torque. That is an insane amount of torque for this class. Transmission is a 7-speed DCT, and inside the city, you also get another class-leading fuel economy figure of 11.8 kilometers per liter. Strangely though, when you go up to the highway, it isn't as efficient, and you're only returning around 14.4 kilometers per liter. Now for the interior of the BAIC Beijing X55 Verve, first we check the door thud, and that just sounds about okay. Now, as we start the car, you'll notice something. My seat will go back to my previous driving position, a feature that you only usually find in much more expensive vehicles. Anyway, now that you are in here, you'll see that it is pretty minimalist too. You have a 10.25-inch digital instrument cluster, which honestly isn't too big, as well as the center 10.1-inch touchscreen, which again, really isn't too big. I wish they used something a little bit bigger just to make this a little bit more modern looking, but I can't really fault it that much because it is pretty responsive and pretty easy to use. However, you do not get Apple CarPlay nor Android Auto, so you do have to rely on CarBitLink, which is pretty annoying to use. It mirrors your phone but can't really control your phone from it, so you have to go back to your phone, which distracts you a lot. It does come with a reverse camera though, as well as a 360-degree view camera. The quality, it's just about okay. It's not great, but it isn't bad either. Now this steering wheel, I like how it is wrapped in leather, but the leather, it doesn't feel super high quality. But again, just like the screen, for example, example, it is just about okay. The buttons on it though, those feel slightly generic and not too great in terms of feel. But what feels great is the dashboard as well as the doors, because this dashboard gets a lot of these soft touch materials, even the side of the doors, even this center part where your elbows or your forearm will touch. So that is a good thing. Now, more things I'm not a big fan of here include these yellow accents on the dashboard. I mean, sure, they give off a nice complement or contrast to the blackness of this interior, but the issue is this car gets ambient lighting. So unless you make the ambient lighting yellow as well, it just feels a little bit mismatched. The seats too get the same yellow stitching, and it also says Beijing right here by the headrest, which, again, come on, stop using Beijing in here. We get it, it's a Beijing. Now this center shifter, it's pretty similar to what you would get with the Audis, like the Q7 and the Q8. It is pretty easy to use, and it gets manual mode, something some of its competitors don't even have. You have an electronic parking brake, 2 tiny cup holders, a wireless charging pad, and yeah, that's about it. Alright, on top you get a panoramic sunroof, and if you're wondering where your AC controls are, unfortunately you do have to go into your infotainment screen to control it, which again is also pretty distracting while you are driving. For advanced driver assistance systems though, it is pretty complete. You get adaptive cruise control, autonomous emergency braking, forward collision warning, lane keeping assist, traffic jam assistance, and all that. Now for the rear seats, first we also check the door. And that sounds better than the front. But what isn't better compared to the front is the materials they use back here. Because while the top part gets the same soft touch materials, this center part right here, which is soft in front, is now pretty hard touch plastic. Now here at the back, space is pretty good. I mean, legroom wise, you can't really complain. Headroom wise, despite this panoramic sunroof, it is also pretty good. I also really like how the front seats are some type of like sports seat, so you do have this small hole right here to kind of look through it. Not that you would actually do that, but I don't know, it just gives off a different feel in here. You kind of see more out the front, or at least the nape of the driver or the passenger in front. And here you get this center armrest with 2 cup holders. You have your own air vents at the back, but while you can independently move the left and right parts of the vent, you can't independently move it up and down. So if the person on the right wants it to the right and the person on the left wants it to the left, they can do that. But if they want it both up, they're fine. If one wants it up, one wants it down, no, it just doesn't work anymore now, does it? As to why BAIC did that, I have no idea. You also get a USB-A port right here, and that's your only charging port by the back. And just in case you want to seat 3 people in here, I think it is more than doable, because this center seat, it isn't too high, so your head doesn't touch the panoramic sunroof. And in terms of the width of the car, it's not exactly the widest, but it isn't the narrowest either, especially for a car in its class. So now we drive the BAIC Beijing X55 Verve, and driving this car is just super surprising because honestly I have pretty low expectations for this vehicle, especially given its name, right, which sounds pretty funny, but it is honestly really good. Starting off with the power, class leading power, and the way the transmission puts it down to the ground is excellent. There's just not much delay right here, even if you have 305 Newton meters of torque, and it is just so responsive. Power aside, what else do I like about this? Well, it's the handling. Because crossover SUVs, yeah, I mean, you would expect them to handle better than ladder frame SUVs, right? Sure, we've already expected that. But this one is exceptionally good. It's very flat around corners. It's pretty stable at highway speeds too. There's just not much to complain. You don't feel the size of this vehicle. It feels more like a subcompact crossover SUV than a compact one. The DCT in here is also probably the most impressive DCTs I've ever tried in this price range, because usually what you have with DCTs is that they're very responsive at high speeds, right? They give you instant gear shifts, and yes, this does that too. But most of the cars in this class with those DCTs, they tend to get very jerky inside city speeds. And for example, you're in stop and go traffic, the very moment you let go of the brake, you can really feel that the clutch still has like a couple of milliseconds that it needs to engage and drive you forward. But for this one, it feels like a conventional automatic transmission. There is no delay, and even if you are at an incline, for example, you do not roll back at all. It is that good. It gets the sporty parts of a DCT for when you want to drive sportily, but also the smoothness of an automatic transmission when you don't. These new crossover SUVs too, with their electric power steering system, usually they're not too communicative, right? And this one, while there is still some sense of numbness to it, it is probably one of the most communicative steerings in its class. Although there is a trade-off for that. If there are some minor bumps, you kind of feel it and you have to fight the steering wheel a little bit more. But that gives you the sensation of somehow a hydraulic power steering system, which for car enthusiasts is always a good thing. Now for the ride, it is pretty firm. It's definitely on the firm side of things, but it is relatively compliant for its class. It doesn't hurt in here. You won't feel uncomfortable even for your passengers if they want to doze off at the back. That is not a problem with the X55 Verve. But what I'm not a big fan of with this vehicle is two things actually, and that is noise. Because when you are going at highway speeds, you don't even have to go the speed limit of 100. The very moment you reach around 70 or 80, you do hear a lot of tire noise. Once you get to the speed limit of around 100, you also get some wind noise. So I just wish that they've increased the noise insulation in here to just make it a little bit more refined. Second thing would be the ADAS system. While the adaptive cruise control is honestly really good, even in low speeds it works perfectly, the traffic jam assistance, my issue is the lane keeping assist. It has a tendency of picking up lane markings a little bit too early. Sometimes when you're about to cross an intersection, it picks up the next one and it kind of fights you to keep you in that lane, that new lane in front of you, which is not really that straight from where you are. So it feels a little bit dangerous sometimes, and it also has a tendency of pulling you towards the right side of the lane, which honestly doesn't really make sense, especially since we have a lot of motorcycles here in the Philippines that wants to cut you on the right side. Yeah, I wish it weren't that sensitive. Finally, on the ADAS things too, it has like sensors, right, to tell you if there's a car nearby or if you're a little bit too close to the car in front of you. Now, for some reason, even if you set the sensitivity to the lowest setting, it will always beep at you, even though you're like, what, 2 or 3 cars away from the car in front of you. It's ridiculous. You really can't turn it off. It gets pretty annoying in here. You just get beeping. No, you just get lots of beeps. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say. Even while you're trying to listen to music, just cruising along EDSA at a very slow pace, it just wouldn't stop beeping at you. So the 2024 BAIC Beijing X55 Verve, it's not perfect. Yes, you have that annoying beeping thing that happens all the time. You have the slightly, very hilarious name, which proudly displays itself both at the front and the back. However, overall, the powertrain is excellent, the comforts are pretty good, and the car, while slightly generic looking from some angles, it is hard to say that it is bad looking. In fact, to some people, this might even look pretty dashing. But now, how much does it cost? Well, it costs 1,348,000 pesos. And given everything that it gives you, including a full suite of advanced driver assistance systems, I think this is yet another Chinese crossover to consider in the market.